A word in advance before I really begin about the color scheme. I know what you're thinking. Those aren't our colors. Those belong to you-know-who. Well, I know who too. But in point of fact, I'll be retiring with a 13-7 record, and so I kind of look at it as I've earned the right to wear these colors, especially at Christmas time. And speaking of Christmas, among other things, Christmas is a time for telling great stories, isn't it? The best of those stories, whether it's A Wonderful Life or Charlie Brown Christmas or even that one about the Grinch, the best of those stories always go back to the greatest Christmas story of all. The story which begins, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a town of Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man named Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. Of all of those great other Christmas stories, though, my family had a clear favorite. My mom loved the 1951 version starring Alistair Sim, while my dad preferred the 1984 TV film featuring George C. Scott. And so, of course, it was the Alistair Sim version we most always watched. But whatever the version, this was always my favorite scene. After several turns to inspect the room around him, Scrooge sat down again. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the corner of the room and communicated, for some purpose now forgotten, with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and with a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly at the outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, as did every bell in the house. This might have lasted for half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun, together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the cellar. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. "It's humbug still," said Scrooge. "I won't believe it." His color changed, though, when without a pause it came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up in the fireplace as if to cry, "I know him, Marley's ghost," and fell again. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights, and boots. The chain he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. "How now?" said Scrooge. "What do you want with me?" "Much." Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Who were you then?" said Scrooge, raising his voice. "You're particular for a shade." "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley." Can you sit down?" asked Scrooge. "I can." "Well, do it then." "You don't believe in me," observed the ghost. "I don't," said Scrooge. "What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?" "I don't know," said Scrooge. "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because," said Scrooge, "a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. You see this toothpick?" "I do," replied the ghost. "You're not looking at it," said Scrooge. "But I see it," said the ghost, notwithstanding. Well, returned Scrooge, I have but to swallow this and be for the rest of my days persecuted by a legion of goblins, all of my own creation. Humbug, I tell you, humbug! Oh, at this the spirit raised a frightful cry and shook its chains with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. Mercy, he cried. Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me? Man of the worldly mind, replied the ghost, do you believe in me or not? I do, said Scrooge. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me? It is required of every man, the ghost returned, that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world, oh, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness. Again, the specter raised a cry and shook its chain and wrung its shadowy hands. You are fettered, said Scrooge, trembling. Tell me, why? I wear the chain I forged in life, replied the ghost. I made it, link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you? Scrooge trembled more and more. Or would you know, pursued the ghost, the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was as full and heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain. Jacob, he said imploringly. Old Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob. I have none to give, the ghost replied. Mark me, in life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole. But you were always a good man of business, Jacob, faltered Scrooge. Business? Cried the ghost, wringing his hands again. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, benevolence, forbearance were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but as a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. It held up its chain at arm's length as if that were the cause of all its unavailing grief, and flung it heavily upon the ground again. At this time of the rolling year, the specter said, I suffer most. Hear me. My time is nearly gone. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer. You were always a good friend to me, said Scrooge. You will be haunted, resumed the ghost, by 3 spirits. Scrooge's countenance fell almost as low as the ghost's had done. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? He demanded in a faltering voice. It is. I think I'd rather not, said Scrooge. Without their visits, said the ghost, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1. couldn't I take 'em all at once and have it over, Jacob? Hinted Scrooge. Expect the second on the next night at the same hour, the third upon the next night, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that, for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us. When it had said these words, the apparition walked backward from him, and every step it took, Scrooge's frosty window raised itself a little, so that when the specter reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach him, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of one another, Scrooge became aware of strange sounds, and Marley's ghost beckoned him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped, not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, for on the raising of the hand he became sensible of confused noise in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regrets, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The specter, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed to the window, desperate in his curiosity. He looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering in restless haste and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Many had been known to Scrooge personally in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat with a monstrous iron safe attached to its ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant whom it saw below upon a doorstep. The misery with them all was, clearly, that they sought to interfere for good in human matters and had lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into the mist or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell. But they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he had walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. Hum. And being from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant. Spoiler alert. Scrooge's story has a happy ending, as will ours, I hope. Scrooge was better than his word. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.